and welcome to the baseball podcast, Cheap Seats Chatter. I'm your host, Mathias Altman Kurosaki, and today I am joined by three distinguished guests as we discuss what we think are some of the best World Series in MLB history. There have been a ton of great moments and a ton of great series throughout all of baseball history in the past century even. We've seen, the 2001 series go 7 games. We've seen a few others go 6 and 7 games. It's always been there's been a lot of great World Series throughout MLB history. But anyway, so my first guest today is a former broadcaster for the California Winter League, as well as a broadcaster and talk show host for the Pac-12 network. We have Alex Clark. Alex, how are you doing today?
Doing fantastic, Mac. Thanks for having me on the show today. I'm glad you get to talk about some of the best words in all of sports. Just get to talk about the World Series.
Yep, of course. My second guest currently runs a YouTube channel called Steel Flyers and works at Sports Fanatic News. We have Joe Bork. Joe, how are you doing today?
Doing swell. The weather's getting nice, and that always makes it even better for baseball season.
Yes, of course. It is starting to get warm on the East Coast. And my final guest is a sports writer covering MLB and the NBA for Overtime Heroics, and he's a host of various sports podcasts such as Takes from the Nosebleeds. He's also a 4-year varsity baseball player for the Milwaukee School of Engineering. It's Cole Raines. Cole, how are we doing today?
I wish I could get that beautiful weather Joe's talking about. We got snow this week, but other than that, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Mac.
Yeah, of course, and thank you all for coming on the show. So first up, our topic today is the World Series. So I have a very simple question for all of you, and you can answer this in any order. Which World Series do you think is the best in history and why? I'll open the floor. Whoever wants to speak first can go.
I'll go, I guess, if anybody else wants to take on first. One of the best to watch is the 2014. I just loved the San Francisco because Madison Bumgarner decided he was a menace. In terms of my favorite road to watch, since Max said I could mention this real quick, that was when Boston was in 2007 because I watched them get through Vlad, who was one of my favorite players growing up, and Grady Sizemore, who too was one of my favorite players growing up. So that was just fun because it was almost like if they lost, I wouldn't even be pissed off. But the Giants one was interesting because they had to win to get there, of course, in a wild card game. So that made that one more interesting, which was against the Pittsburgh Pirates. And then they beat the Nationals, which, of course, had Harper, Rendon. They would have had Jason Worth at that time. So they had those guys on their team. They were able to beat a very good St. Louis Cardinals team after becoming a wild card team is how they got there. So their road was not easy. And then when it got to the World Series, they smacked them in game 1, 7-1, and then Kansas City smacked them in game 2, 7-2. Then it was 3-2, and then the Giants won 11-4, 5-0, and then the Giants ended up winning 4-3 in the final game by, I guess we all remember who closed this, who had a great closing performance, pitching good in this game, but Bumgarner pitches great again in 5 innings, I believe it was, and closes it out and does really good in that game. So this Giants team was just literally like Cole Hamels put the 08 Phillies on his back, but Madison Bumgarner took that to like a different universe. It isn't even to Pluto and back. Like he literally just took that to a different galaxy and back, putting the team on your back. And that was just ridiculous to watch. Of course, Kansas City was able to get the revenge and win a World Series on the league, not the Giants, next season. But it was a great World Series, and I've loved Madison Bumgarner. Now he's struggling in his career, but when he was on the Giants, he was a joy to watch. And that just was beautiful to see. I don't think I'm ever going to see a pitcher in this day and age just take over a playoffs that much by pitching after just pitching like 2 days ago coming out of the pen. Like I don't think I'm ever going to see that again in today's day and age, especially now that teams see the after effects that it actually has had on Mad Bum.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Madison Bumgarner. He has an insane track record when it comes to the playoffs. You mentioned that game against the Pirates. I remember watching that with my brother. He went to school in Pittsburgh, so we all kind of like the Pirates, and we saw Mad Bum just throw an absolute masterpiece to end their season, and he really did tear it up. And that World Series was no exception. I believe he allowed one run all postseason, which was in Game 1. Who wants to go next on this question?
I've got a couple. I'm looking at the 2011 Cardinals-Rangers World Series. Obviously, that's the David Freese breakout, had the big game in Game 6. Game 6 is obviously the highlight. Coming to the ninth inning, Neftali Feliz was awesome for the Rangers all season, and they kind of wheels came off. David Freese hit a double. Nelson Cruz, that was the end of him in the outfield. Now he's a DH, and you get the back and forth of, is Albert Pujols going to get a ring for the Cardinals? And is what are we doing with Mike Napoli and Josh Hamilton, Elvis Andrews? Rangers had all that talent. Cardinals had arguably the best player in baseball at the time. It was back and forth, a lot of fun to watch. That one stuck out to me. But personally, I think it might be a little bit of recency bias, but I thought the 2017 series of the Astros and Dodgers was great. 7 games, you got superstars on both sides. Kershaw, Verlander, arguably the 2 best pitchers in baseball. Cody Bellinger was an MVP candidate. Ken Giles was absolutely all over the place that entire series, and I know that is a name that has been hot in the streets because one of our friends here is a Mariners fan, but I think this has been I'm highlighting the games, I guess. The 2 best games I ever saw was at Game 6 of the Cardinals and Rangers, and the game, I believe it was Game 5 Game 4 of the 5 hours 13-12. Or no, that was Game 5.
I think that was Game 5. That was Game 5, yeah.
That was the extra inning, and absolutely boggling game. Charlie Morton breakthrough had the big close in Game 7. It was back and forth the entire series. I personally think that was the best World Series I have ever seen in 2017. So,
yeah, and fans will say the Astros were cheating and they were stealing signs and all that, but overall, that 2017 series, I remember that, especially that Game 5. I mean, it was back and forth all game. It was definitely a wild one. There were a lot of great games throughout that series. So yeah, that's a reasonable choice. Alex, what's your pick on this?
Yeah, so I'm also going to have a little bit of recency with this, but my pick, it's not too recent, but still within the last 10 years. I'm actually going to go with the 2016 World Series between the Chicago Cubs and the Cleveland Indians, and it's for 2 words only. Game 7. Game 7 is one of the most dramatic phrases in all of sports, and this one went down as an instant classic. You have a game that was going back and forth the entire way through. The pitching was good. Everything about this game was incredible. Even to the fact they had a rain delay in the game itself, and that just made it even more so. It was a 17-minute rain delay after 9 innings. You think, okay, after 9 innings of play, you're going to be done with the game. No, they're tied. And on top of it, let's just take 17 minutes to let the rain happen. And during that rain delay, what was interesting from it is one of the true players for the team, Jason Hayward, who had been basically the GOAT of the team during the season and in the regular season, called the teammates into the weight room during that team and told them, we are the best team in baseball for a reason. Stick together, and we're going to win this game. Anthony Rizzo actually then called the rain delay in that speech the most important thing to happen to the Chicago Cubs in the past 100 years. And I mean, it makes sense. There's so much drama that happened in this game. From Rajai Davis, who had hit in his entirety of 11 seasons of Major League Baseball, a total of 55 homers, hitting a homer off of Aroldis Chapman, that when Chapman was really on his A game. You having that just to put even more drama on it, and then I love the pitching on this, but for the final save, the final pitches, to have a guy that had never had a save opportunity in Major League Baseball, in Mike Montgomery. You said I'm a Mariner fan. Former Mariner Mike Montgomery traded over that season for Daniel Vogelbach, who is now part of the Brewers. But him getting the save in that, and I'm not the biggest fan of Joe Buck, just because people who know me know I'm not that. But his call to end that was like where it was a little dribbler over to Chris Bryant, throwing out for the final thing was iconic, and it ended something that had been one of the biggest almost jokes in all of sports in the Chicago Cubs over 100-year World Series winning drought, and that ended it. It was almost like watching the curse of the Bambino go away, the curse of Bartman for the Cubs, and to see that finally happened. There was so much drama in that last game that the entire series, as you watch it, seemed to be building to that crescendo, and Game 7 delivered on that. You did not know who was going to win until that final out had happened. To quote Joe Buck during that last play, this is going to be a tough play. Bryant, the Cubs win the World Series.
Yeah, and you got to remember also that, the Cubs had to wait 108 years to win a World Series. They hadn't even made it since 1945, and they were going up against the team in the Indians who hadn't won since 1948. So they had their own 68-year drought to break. And when the Red Sox broke their curse back in 2004, they swept the Cardinals. After that, they were down 3-0 in the ALCS, and after that,
Mac, you were stealing my thunder because that was the one more World Series I was going to give.
Oh yeah, well, I mean that was the Red Sox barely trailed.
They came back. Yeah, well, it's also because they came back to get to that World Series, and since Luke isn't on this podcast, I've absolutely no issue saying this against those damn Yankees. So they came back and did that, and also that Game 1 was a slugfest. And then Derek Lowe, Schilling, and Martinez just proceeded to go, yeah, see all you that hit in Game 1? You all suck now and ain't getting hits for the rest of the series. And on a Cardinals team, that was a slugfest. So that was pretty impressive for them to shut them down. And obviously Kevin Millar was the best. No, I'm kidding. But that team was really good. Uke was good. I loved that team back then with Uke, Schilling, the pitching rotation with Pedro. Listening to 1-5 on Intentional Talk reminisce about that team, I could be having the worst day of my life, and then if he starts talking about the 0-4 Red Sox, I'm like, okay, great, all's right in the world again. So yeah, that was definitely a very fun season to follow, and then they ended up spanking them after that Game 1 slugfest. That's why that was such a weird World Series for me. I watched as a young kid, and I'm like, what? Because there was so much scoring in Game 1, and then it was just shut down, and that was pretty impressive for me as such a young kid watching that at that time too. When I first watched it, I've gone back and watched it since, but from first watching it.
Well, yeah, and I was gonna say, so the Red Sox swept the Cardinals to break their curse, but the Cubs had a uphill battle. They fell behind 3-1 in that series, and even after winning Game 5, they had to go on the road and finish off that series, which was definitely a classic. But the series I'm picking is I guess it's a sort of a popular pick. I sort of mentioned it on the open, but the 2001 World Series, in my opinion, is the best World Series ever. I believe I'm the youngest one on this show, but I was only, I believe, 18 months old when this series was played. This was, the young Diamondbacks. They'd only been in the league since 1998, facing off against the Yankees, who were looking for their 4th World Series win in a row. And they were representing a city that had been decimated by a tragedy in the 9/11 attacks just a month earlier. This was the first time that baseball was played in October because they had to push the season back a week. And this series, I mean, it was everything you could have asked for. I mean, the Diamondbacks start out with 2 convincing wins facing, in Game 1, they win 9-1 behind Curt Schilling against Mike Mussina, who's a Hall of Famer. Then in Game 2, Randy Johnson, making his first World Series start ever, throws a complete game shutout, wins 4-0. But then they head back to the Bronx, and the Yankees take Game 3, 2-1 behind Roger Clemens, pitching a great game against Brian Anderson. And then we head back to Game 4 with Curt Schilling again pitching, and he pitches 7 great innings. But Byung-Hyun Kim comes in for the 6-out save, and after a clean 8th inning, he serves up a game-tying 2-run homer to Tino Martinez, and then this is where Derek Jeter earned his nickname Mr. November when he, in the 10th inning, with 2 outs, homering off of Kim again. So Kim served up 2 homers in that game. And then you have game 5 where, again, the D-backs, they get their pitching performance. They had Miguel Batista go, and he pitched 7 2/3 shutout innings. And Byung-Hyun Kim comes in again. And I remember hearing interviews like, there's no way he blows it again. But Scott Brocious, with 2 outs, ties the game. He's another home run. And then they ended up walking it off on an Alfonso Soriano RBI single in the next inning, which, I mean, at this point, you got to be thinking all the momentum is on the Yankees side. But then the Diamondbacks go back in game 6 and they crush Andy Pettitte, win 15-2. They were just knocking the ball all over the place. Randy Johnson pitches 7 strong innings. And then game 7, some consider this the best game ever played in baseball history. You know, it was 1-0 D-backs going into the 7th inning. And then he had an RBI by Tino Martinez to make it 1-1. And then the 8th inning against Schilling, Alfonso Soriano put the Yankees in the lead 2-1. And then, you know, Mariano Rivera, greatest closer ever, a rare hiccup for him. 9th inning. First of all, the D-backs bring in Randy Johnson on 0 days rest after pitching the night before, and he gets 4 outs very, very easily. And then the D-backs just rallied against Rivera after he struck out the side in the 8th. You know, Rivera didn't really do anything wrong. He was making his pitches, but Mark Grace led off with a single. Rivera threw a ball away on a sac bunt. Also, on another sac bunt, Scott Brocious had an easy double play he could have turned, but he didn't. And instead, Tony Womack drove in the tying run. And then after a hit by pitch to Craig Counsell, Luis Gonzalez hit one over the drawn-in infield to win the World Series. A very dramatic back-and-forth series. The home team won every game. I don't see many series that could rival this. You guys have all presented some great series that all went 7 games, but I think that this one right here, I mean, it really sticks out. And it was, you know, a toddler of a franchise and the Diamondbacks taking down a team looking for their 4th straight championship.
I like where you're going on with this, and that's kind of one thing that we didn't really say at the beginning of this, is that in order for, in my opinion at the very least, in order for a series to be the best of all time or to be anywhere near the top of it, you need to have Game 7. Game 7 just makes it so then there's the drama. You never know who's going to win, and it makes it feel so much more like these are the 2 teams that matter. These are the 2 best, 2 Titans slugging it out. And if you don't have that Game 7, you just feel like, okay, you know, maybe one team was here to play and one just wasn't quite there yet.
Game 7, it's the greatest 2 words in sports. You know, it sure, in football, you know, you only get 1 game each round. You only get 1 Super Bowl every year. But in all these sports, in baseball, I mean, you get 162 games. Normally, 2020, there was only 60 games, but still, you know, you get to the playoffs, the World Series, you know, some players may fade under the bright lights, but others will rise up. And we've seen, I think, in all these series, you know, some players, you know, maybe in 2001, Curt Schilling and Randy Johnson were co-MVPs, but sometimes you see guys that are lesser known show up, like David Freese, you know, like, you know, in Game 7, 2016, you see Mike Montgomery, Carl Edwards stepped up. You know, it's not always the superstars who rise up and take over the series. So, anyway.
No, like for Boston in one, we had Dave Roberts, you figure, and like other guys step up throughout the playoffs, like Kevin Millar, who I mentioned, who would not be guys you would envision going, this guy's going to get a key hit for us in the postseason. So yeah, it's definitely, you're right. That's the as a final thought for me, just the beauty of sports. Like, you never know what's going to happen. Like you said, Randy pitching after nobody probably would expect of that happening. And then in today's day and age, you definitely wouldn't have expected Bumgarner's stuff. So it's just the way it is. It's just a lovely beauty of sports. It always goes into just not expecting certain things when it comes to certain World Series, and that's just what I love about baseball. It seems to be even more so than hockey, my other favorite sport. There's just so much stuff in the World Series that is just unpredictable, where like you get a guy to pick a starter to go in and you'll be like, wait, this guy's starting game one? And you'll be like, why do they do that? And then it's because he's like an old veteran who actually has savviness, and then he pitches well, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess I'm the idiot, and he actually knows exactly what he's talking about. So um, I think it's just a beauty to see when it comes to that. Like for the Phillies, for example, I never thought we would win the '08 World Series. Our pitching rotation was not that great on paper. Let's just put it that way. And a bunch of guys just stepped up. So I completely agree with you on that sentiment.
Hey, don't
Well,
be dissing my man Jamie. Don't be dissing my man Jamie Moyer right there.
Well, Jamie Boyer barely pitched as a starter in the playoffs. He was mostly out
I'm
of
shocked.
pen, and then he got injured on that one unfortunate play. But he didn't always pitch a start, but he did well. But he was the other guy. Like Brett Myers was good, but like you wouldn't go into the playoffs going, I full-heartedly put my full-on faith into Brett Myers helping this team along with Joe Like, that was more what it was. It was like, I believe Cole Hamels, Jamie Moyer's that savvy veteran, like I just said, that you would just get the starts to you don't expect. The other two, it was like, oh, good, they actually stepped up even more than.
No, I'm just giving you five. Jamie Moyer, one of my favorite pitchers of all time, and I believe still has the record for being the oldest pitcher in baseball history. But no, I love watching these kinds of World Series because of that. You never know who you are going to see. And I just love, like, again, one of my favorite players that I don't remotely even know much about anything at all is David Freese, just for what he was able to do in that World Series, just completely dismantling the Rangers. It was beautiful.
Well, I'm glad we all kind of took in the same vein stuff we were alive for, because there are, I mean, obviously, like, there are a ton of World Series that were before our time. And you like the one that goes to my mind, obviously, you look at the 1975 with Carlton Fisk, like that's probably the best World Series of all time. 7 games, you got him waving the ball to stay fair, and it's going bananas, and the Reds end up winning it, and there's big emotions, huge moments. You got a lot of talent there, but like, I'm glad we all kind of like the ones we have seen, which pretty
another
like,
good one in our lifetime, Cole, that just dawned on me from you saying that was when that dude Anthony Reyes, the rookie for the Cardinals, started. I think it was game one, and then went 8 innings in 06. Yeah, that was another good World Series that set the tone.
Yeah, that was against Justin Verlander too.
Yeah,
well, he was really young.
Yeah, and Cole, I'm glad. I mean, you mentioned 1975. There's a joke about that, because everyone talks about the Carlton Fisk home run, and there's a joke that Red Sox fans think they won that series 3-4, because you talk all about that Game 6 home run, but they still lost the series to the Big Red Machine. And then, my family, we always talk about the 1986 World Series when the Mets beat the Red Sox, and how my dad was at the Bill Buckner game when the ball went through his legs. He just happened to get tickets that morning. And, one last thing I'd say on this topic was the 2002 World Series, I think, gets lost in the shuffle a bit, kind of because it was following up that 01 series. But that was another 7-game series. And talk about obscure players. That series sort of turned on its head when Scott Spezio, he was a journeyman infielder. He hit a 3-run homer when they were down 5-0. And the Angels ended up coming back to win that game 6-5, and then winning Game 7 against a team that was led by the titan of baseball, Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds and Jeff Kent on that team, and the Angels were able to upset them.
They were truly the angels in the outfield.
Yeah, literally. And people remember that 02 season for the A's winning 20 games in a row. That was the Moneyball team, but people may forget the Angels actually ended up taking their only World Series title that year. So anyway, I'm going to move on to my next question, which is obviously, as I've sort of hinted at, a lot of these series, all of these series, I would say, had many twists and turns throughout. What moment do you think really defined the series or sort of turned it on its head that, what makes it stand out from the others?
Taking out Blake Snell. Sorry.
Oh,
still
yeah.
Not over
No,
it.
Okay,
not,
yeah,
still
yeah,
not
Blake
over it.
Snell, yeah.
But no, that one sticks out because it's once again recency bias. So,
I mean, yes, it's recency bias, but it also, it makes sense. I mean, you have Snell, who again was pitching a beautiful ball game in the must-win type of area against a team that was, if I'm going to be brutally honest here, sorry, Rays fans, it was a David and Goliath type story. Here, you have the Rays who have very little money to spend. You had the homegrown players, and you had all this ready to go against the juggernauts that were the Dodgers. And you played a little too. They played a little too heavily into the metrics and into all this. And I'm gonna be sorry, but it cost them the series because right now Blake Snell was absolutely dealing, and you took him out just because you're like, okay, we know you've been good, but we're going to go with the numbers on this one. And sometimes, I understand that it's good to go with the numbers because numbers don't lie. But when you're pitching like that, when you are pitching on the run of your life and you just get pulled out right there, just to borrow a quote from one of my favorite shows, Letterkenny, Kevin Cash, you are spare parts, bud.
Yeah, I mean, we see this in like every series. I feel like there's always like one moment that really just like turns it around. I mentioned the Spezio homer in Game 6 in 02. I think in the 01 series, I mean, it really, in my opinion, because if you think about it, so in that ninth inning, it starts out with Mark Grace hitting the single, and then you go to a pinch runner, but it really turns around when Damian Miller hits the sac bunt, it goes right to Mariano Rivera and he throws it into center field. Because then now you have first and second, nobody out. This is, a 2-1 ball game. And then from there, I mean, first of all, Jay Bell hits another comebacker and Mariano Rivera, he picks up the ball, throws it to third base. And if you watch the footage, after Scott Brocious gets the out at third, he has all the time in the world to throw to first base and get Jay Bell at first, but he doesn't. And then after that, Tony Womack doubles down the right field line to score pinch runner Midri Cummings. And then after Craig Counsell got hit by a pitch, I mean, Tim McCarver said leading up to this, the problem with, playing the infield in is that with a guy like Gonzalez, Rivera's going to try to get a lot of broken bats. And he got a broken bat blooper. It was just beyond Jeter. I mean, if Jeter is playing in his normal position, he probably gets that ball. Who knows what happens? We see this game go to extra innings and forever and ever. Who knows what's going on? But like,
yeah, agreed.
Yeah, but like for the series you guys picked, like,
I had something.
Which moment do you think is?
I just had something.
I wanted to add on to what Alex was saying about the 2020 because I have another one. Obviously, the Blake Snell thing, and then I'll get into the one I said. But what about Manuel Margot trying to steal a home and there's no fans there, so Kershaw can hear what the guys are saying? Like, hey, he's stealing home till the ball home, step off. There's fans there. That's a different story, right? Like that obviously.
True.
I mean, there were fans there, but it was in limited capacity.
It was in limited capacity.
But like I'm saying, like home field advantage, like you got people screaming and yelling that he's trying to steal home. Kershaw doesn't hear that. He's safe. It's a different series too. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of what ifs in the 2021. But back to the 2011 one. For me, it has to be David Freese. It has to be Nelson Cruz botching that ball in right and leading to that extra inning game where the Cardinals just absolutely took all of the momentum and heading into that Game 7. So,
Yeah, and one quick thing about that is that, I mean, you can, Rangers fans may blame Neftali Feliz for that, or they might blame it on the bullpen because, they took the lead again in the 10th inning, if I'm not mistaken. Josh Hamilton did a 2-run homer, then they rallied back again. But really, I mean, it's 2 outs. It's World Series Game 6. The Rangers have never won a World Series, and they're playing a defensive liability in right field. Nelson Cruz was not playing nearly deep enough. He probably should have caught that ball. Ron Washington also had Endy Chavez on his bench, who's a much better defender. Instead, he leaves Nelson Cruz in the game, and that ball just, it would be one thing if Cruz played the carom well, and he's maybe able to hold Berkman at third, but because of how poorly he judged it and he jumped and just completely whiffed on it, because of that, Freese is able to get into third with a triple. Berkman's able to come home with the tying run. I mean, Cole, I think you hit it right on the head. From that on, I mean, it just felt like everything was going to go the Cardinals' way.
100%. And the fact that I believe it was Ron Washington, right? That was manager.
Yeah, it was Ron Washington. Yep.
And you have the Chavez piece on the bench. I know you want the offense, but you got to play to win that game. You got to. So, I agree.
For me, Mac, when it comes to mine, I already kind of said it. It's for the 14. It would just be Bumgarner. He came in, he pitched 2 days before, got the win in that game, came in and saved the game in the final game. I mean, Madison Bumgarner was clearly the defining, not moment, but multiple moments of that 2014 World Series. The defining moment would be him saving Game 7. But he was defining multiple moments. The only other one I would have, and this would be the only time in history I would ever pick a defining moment in Game 1, is just because of how good Justin Verlander was this season. In 2012, when Pablo Sandoval proceeded to go, you know what's great today? I'm hitting 3 home runs and going for a hat trick. So that, I feel like, just set the tone for that series where the Tigers literally just were thinking in Vince Lombardi logic, like, what the hell is going on out here? And then they just couldn't play catch up after that, because that's the only series I would ever mention a Game 1, but it's just because Verlander was literally one of the best I've seen in my lifetime in that 2012 season, like untouchable almost. And then Pablo comes in, 2 of those 3 are off of him. So that's the only, I swear to God, I don't love the Giants. But 2 of the things I mentioned are the Giants, but that's just another thing that dawned on me also.
Yeah, well, I was going to say real quick about your 2014 World Series. I mean, what about Alex Gordon? It was the second to last, it's 2 outs in the 9th inning, and he hits the ball into the gap, and he gets by all the outfielders, and they struggle to pick it up, and he stops at third. But, like, yeah, you almost wonder, and I've spoken to, I think, a lot of people about this. Like, what if Alex Gordon is running hard out of the box on that play? If he is hustle, because you don't see him really start running hard until the ball gets past the outfielders. If he's like busting out of the box, he might circle the bases. He might tie the game there.
Yeah, he might have been able to score if he was busting it there. It's just hard because I see so many, like, he's not the only player. If somebody thinks they're getting a single, you don't see a lot of guys busted out of the box if they think it's just going to be fielded on a one hop by the outfielder. So I don't want to get on him too much, but yeah, you do want to hustle a little bit more, but it is what it is. I've seen multiple Phillies players do that over the years that I want to get on their neck, and then you just watch it around the league. Ever since I started having MLB TV years ago, you see it just happens all over. So it's just a thing people do. If you think you're getting a single, most guys, unless if you're just like people that are just go nuts every 5 seconds, like a Tatis or a Harper or somebody, or a Grady Sizemore or somebody I mentioned earlier that's always going hard, you don't always hustle if you think it's just going to be a single.
Yeah. And then Alex, I know that 2016 World Series was pretty wild. There any one moment that just really defines the series?
So I'm going to be honest, mine is not a moment that happened on the field. It's that rain delay. The rain delay that happened there, again, quoting back to Rizzo, changed the series, changed that one game completely, because it came from the Game 7 is what it all comes down to, as it always does. And the fact where all the momentum at that moment was for the Indians before that rain delay happened. That's where it just was. Being able to then go into the locker room and come back even more motivated, extremely motivated, just to try and go and win that one baseball game. You just saw that the mentality was different at that one moment. Everything that it took in order to even get to that one moment, how can it not be the defining feature of it? Because, yeah, you have the Rajai Davis home run off of Aroldis Chapman. You have Mike Montgomery coming in for a save that's what the heck happened for his very first ever save. But honestly, I think the rain delay just changed everything. And for a series that we've touched on this before, it was between two teams that had not won a World Series in a very long time. One, again, much more than the other. But if the Cubs win that World Series, then the Indians now have that longest streak. And if the Indians have it, then if the Indians win, then the Cubs streak continues as being one of the longest reigning and one of the most impressive, or should I say, non-impressive, one of the most non-impressive events in all of baseball. So, although there's one thing I do want to say, and this is not with the World Series that I gave, this is with another World Series here, but there's one moment that is a defining feature that I just want to bring up, if that's all right. As much as it
go ahead.
pains me.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
yep.
The 1991 World Series. And Lonnie Smith. Lonnie Smith with a huge base running snap that he's on first base, and a big opportunity for him and the Braves to win the World Series in what, again, was also another amazing World Series, Game 7. It's like a deep fly ball to left center field, and for whatever reason here, Lonnie Smith, he says he was being deked out by the infielder, but I don't know how much I buy that. We'll see. I take a look at this, and if he's able to run like he's supposed to do, if he's able to get to second base, then third, then home, like he had the speed to do, then the Braves win that World Series over the Twins. And it's not even close. And just if you go back and watch that replay of it, you almost find yourself yelling at Smith, "Why aren't you running? Why aren't you running?" And it just hurts to watch at that point.
Well, see, that's a perfect example of Alex. Like, he thought that was a single. You're a perfect example of someone you should actually get on their behind for not running. Where if you think it's a single, not everyone runs. Lonnie Smith, you're spot on, Alex. That would be a perfect example of someone you could rip their head off for doing what they did.
But that's the other thing here, is that with Lonnie Smith in that series, Lonnie Smith is basically the reason why, one of the main reasons why the Braves even made it to the World Series at that point. His complete, I should say, re-breakout was just incredible. To see what he was able to do with a baseball bat after what had happened to him over the course of his career. If you guys want to know a little bit more about that, go look up John Boyce's video on it. Really good in-depth look at his career. But I look at this, and then just to see that all of it culminated in that one moment, it's heartbreaking just to see it. That's why you're yelling. You're not so much yelling at him. It's that you're yelling at the story to have the happy ending that it never gets.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to say about that series, I'm glad you brought up 1991, was that, another thing that happened in that game, and I've noticed, we've talked about a few moments that, defining moments that happened in Game 7, and, that was, there are a lot of times where, the defining moment, like Joe said for 2012, like it could happen earlier in the series, but sometimes, it doesn't happen like that. And, that just brings me to, though, my one last question. So, we have all these World Series. If you could take a matchup of any two world champions and put them in a series against each other together, which one do you think would produce a series that is possibly more exciting than any of the ones that we picked today?
Or I'm going to put my Vince
Sorry, can you say that one more time? Can you say that one more time just because I want to make sure I got like how that's worded right for you?
So, take any matchup from history or any two teams that won from history and make a matchup that could be more exciting than any of the ones we picked today.
I'm going to put my Vince McMahon main event hat on right now just for pure baseball and psychoticness and teams that hate each other. 2017 Astros, 2020 Dodgers. Give me a 7-game series between those two, and let's watch
that would be
madness.
Awesome. That would be awesome.
Vince McMahon would be proud.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah.
Because you get the guys that you get a revamped Dodgers team with Mookie Betts, and they are all just angry as angry can be. What had happened in 2017? Kershaw feels slighted. You got Darvish on the Dodgers, or no, he's not on the 2020 Dodgers, but you get Walker Buehler, who's revamped. I was thinking you Darvish in 2017. But you get, I think Joe Kelly was on that 2020 Dodgers team. I'm not mistaken. He's had issues.
Yeah,
with
he's the guy Kelly. Who he threw at he struck out Carlos Correa and mocked him afterwards and got suspended. Yeah.
So you got a bunch of guys that absolutely hate the Astros, and knowing what we know now, it is baseball. It is great baseball. It is great entertainment. It is great chippiness. It's got like legitimately the makings to be arguably the best series you will ever see. So,
yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I want to find another answer just because I like to bring diversity to it. I mean, the only thing I could say maybe instead of the Astros would be the 1998 Yankees that went 114-48. But that series just sounds so amazing. Oh my gosh. I would love to see Dodgers 2020 versus Astros 2017. Just like you hit the nail on the head on that one. How chippy it would be between everybody. The amount of pure talent on both sides, say on both teams for that, would just make for a series that I would want to buy over and over and over and over again. Just I would never leave my seat at that point because it would just be incredible. These two teams just had so much star power, pitching wise, fielding wise, hitting wise, all of it was just incredible to see. Putting them together for that big quote unquote, this way it would be a rematch. Oh, that would be. I'm salivating thinking of that right now.
Yeah, for me, it honestly is hard to top putting those teams together. The only thing I could think of is like historic rivalries. If you want to put like, say, the 09 Yankees team with my favorite Red Sox team to win the World Series, which was the 04, just because those two games are always rivalries, and obviously nobody in Boston other than Big Papi really liked Alex Rodriguez during his playing career, and Big Papi hid that pretty well during his playing career until post-career. But those are the only thing I could really think of there, where a selfish one would be me putting the 04 Red Sox with the 08 Phillies and then seeing who battles it out there. I honestly would pick Boston over the Phillies, not going to lie. Pitching rotation is much better, but that would just be a selfish one. But other than that, I can't really think of them because that one's just so death-defining because of how pissed off, like Cole said. You've never seen players that pissed off at another team in baseball. Like, there's been times maybe in hockey, like in the past, like back in the 70s and 80s, you're seeing documentaries like the teams were literally just that pissed off they almost fought going back to their locker rooms. But in baseball, you've never seen another team just that deliberately wanting to just take shots at the other team. And that's why I feel like there's just nothing that could really top that, honestly, at this point.
Well, so you guys actually, obviously, I think the 2020 Dodgers would have to be in almost any series possible, in my opinion. The two ones I was thinking of, and Cole, I'm really glad you mentioned the 2017 Astros because that would be insane because those Astros were loaded, and obviously the 2020 Dodgers were. But one that Alex, you mentioned for a second, the 1998 Yankees. That is the team that is commonly thought of as the greatest team from the modern era. They went 114-48 and just dominated in the playoffs. They swept the Rangers in the ALDS. They won in 6 against the Indians, and then against a very good Padres team, they swept them, and they made it look really easy. So, I think you take the 1998 Yankees, who were so dominant, led by Tino Martinez, Derek Jeter, Scott Brocious, Bernie Williams, who was a batting champion. You had Darryl Strawberry, who was 36 at the time, Paul O'Neill, so many great players, Chuck Knobloch, Jorge Posada. And then on the pitching side, they had Andy Pettitte and Mariano Rivera and David Wells and David Cohn. Heck, they had a young Orlando Hernandez, or not really young. He was 32, but it was his rookie year. He was, El Duque, and his leg kick. He was fantastic. They had the best offense in the league and the best pitching in the league, facing off against that 2020 Dodgers, which I think over the course of a 162-game season, that might be the greatest team from the modern era. I mean, they went 43-17 the regular season. They really breezed through their first 2 matchups before running through a little bit of resistance from the Braves. They fell behind 3-1, but the Dodgers were just. I feel like a lot of their wins were convincing. I think if you put those 2 teams on the same diamond, I mean, it's power on power. You got the team that averaged almost 6 runs per game going up against another team that scored also averaged almost 6 runs per game, and both teams with fantastic pitching staffs. I mean, the Dodgers with Cole, you mentioned. I mean, you had Kershaw, you had Buehler, you had in the bullpen, you had Jansen, you had Trinan, you had Brusdar Graterol, Jake McGee, Victor Gonzalez, Julio Urias, Dustin May, like so many great players. And then the other team that I could see putting up a good one also, I mean, I hate to stick with the Dodgers, but obviously I can't see a team that'd be more exciting than those Dodgers facing off against would also be a rematch. The team that I'd like to see them face off against also would be the 2018 Red Sox. The Red Sox in the 2010s, in 2018, for that decade, they won 108. They won the most games of any team that decade with 108 games won. They were phenomenal. Mookie Betts was an MVP. JD Martinez was also top 5 in MVP voting. Xander Bogaerts hitting really well. Mitch Moreland was an all-star. In the bullpen, they had Craig Kimbrell closing things out, and in the rotation with Nate Eovaldi, who they picked up, and Chris Sale, and David Price, Rick Porcello, Eduardo Rodriguez, just so many great arms. I think, again, those 2 teams, they met in the 2018 World Series, and the 2018 Dodgers didn't really put up much of a fight against the Red Sox, but I think the 2020 Dodgers arguably were more stacked. And I say this in my lifetime, I think the 2018 Red Sox, over the course of a full 162-game season, they were the most dominant team I'd ever watched. So obviously the 2020 Dodgers only got to play 60 regular season games, but I think those 2 teams also would make for a fantastic matchup.
I got another one not including the Dodgers. I mean, obviously, like we said, we can toot the Dodgers horn all we want, but everyone knows how great they were. How about a little cross-town rivalry? 05 White Sox, 16 Cubbies. Just go straight Chicago,
yeah.
like just pure like baseball.
Cool. Yeah.
Just like pure baseball-wise, I'm like trying to think of like what would be the best staff, because the team that sticks out to me, obviously the Dodgers have a really good staff in 2020, but 2019 the Nationals had a pretty good staff. You had a young and up-and-coming Juan Soto, Anthony Rendon was there. You had Scherzer, you had Corbin, you had Strasburg, Anibal Sanchez was throwing really well. The bullpen had some guys. Pure staff-wise, I mean, obviously the Astros that year had a great staff too. Verlander, Cole, we don't need to toot their horn, but I mean, they're 2 NL teams, but I would like to see a matchup between those 90s Braves and that Nationals team, because those Braves had 3 arms too. I mean, obviously Nationals don't go up in par with Maddox, Smoltz, and Glavine, but 1, 2, 3 of Strasburg, Scherzer, and Corbin would be a lot of fun to see what that, like a 3-game set between those 2 would look like as well.
Yeah. Well, another one I had was, since I mentioned the 14 Giants, would be, I was thinking of it because you brought them up, Mac, as yours, how Randy just kept taking the ball. So seeing those 0-1 Diamondbacks with the 14 Giants and seeing a different type of pitcher, but the Mad Bum just kind of take on just both of those guys. Just saying, just keep giving me the ball and seeing who dies first, basically, and gives up the series to the other team. That would have been interesting to see, since that probably would be what would come to fruition if that series did come to be with those two teams. So that's just why I thought of that matchup. It would be crazy to see two starters just keep going out there for the betterment of their team.
Yeah, and one other matchup I also just thought of would be, again, the 0-1 D-backs, but facing off against the 0-2 Angels. I think those are two teams, both had very young, exciting offense. They had the Angels were led by Troy Glaus and Garrett Anderson and Tim Salmon, whereas the D-backs were led by Luis Gonzalez, Matt Williams, Steve Finley, although, he was sort of a veteran. Then they're
binge up, baby.
Yeah. The pitching staff, I think, there were two different styles. I think the Angels didn't have as much starting pitching. They had a young John Lackey. They had 34-year-old Kevin Apier. They had Aaron Seeley, Jared Washburn, and Ramon Ortiz. Whereas the Diamondbacks had their aces. They had Kurt Schilling and Randy Johnson. But their bullpen, Byung-Hyun Kim, fantastic. Other than that, there weren't a ton of great arms in that pen. Whereas the 0-2 Angels, they had Troy Percival, who was one of the best relievers in the game. Ben Weber was really good that year. Brendan Donnelly was fantastic. He was an all-star. Scott Shields. And then also that season is when they called up Francisco Rodriguez, that's when he earned the nickname K-Rod. He was a 20-year-old reliever who was just blowing hitters away. I think those two teams, they both won the World Series as kind of underdogs, I would almost say. But I think that if you put those two teams together in a matchup, you could see a lot of different styles of play come together to, make it really exciting. So anyway, do you guys have any other final thoughts on this topic?
I'll put up one more World Series idea that I think would be kind of fun at least to see, and that would be the 2012 Giants versus the 2004 Red Sox. I think that would just be fun. The reason why is the 2012. I'm kind of splitting the difference here for the Giants because again they did win three titles, and you had to figure out, do you want the 10 version where it had the Kane and Lincecum combo with a babyface Madison Bumgarner? Do you want the 2014 edition with fully functioning Bumgarner, but no Kane and Lincecum? Go with the 12 version. It's pretty solid. Again, you got Bumgarner, Kane, and actually Ryan Vogelsong when he wasn't absolutely terrible. And you had some good players on that Giants team, but what I really like about this matchup here is that both teams are the definition of scrappy, where there's a lot of guys that are really good, but you just have to keep fighting for it. They just kept going. You're like, when are you going to tire out? And the answer was never. They just kept on going. We have the Giants on top of it. Hitting-wise, they had, Hunter Pence, Marco Scutaro, and Melky Cabrera all hitting over 300. And then you take a look at the 04 Red Sox that did something that people said was impossible in breaking the curse of the Bambino. And on top of it, yeah, you have the hitters in David Ortiz, Manny Ramirez, and Damon as well. But you remember, the pitching was absolutely incredible as well. I mean, you have two Hall of Fame quality pitchers in Pedro Martinez and in Kurt Schilling. That whole 2004 Red Sox team was nothing short of history making, purely because of the curse of the Bambino. But it was still an amazing team. But they learned the phrase of never say die. And that's what was beautiful about that team. Both of these two going at it, you would just see a matchup that you do not know what's going to happen. One moment you'll see David Ortiz hit a home run into McCovey Cove. And then the next one, you're going to see Marco Scutaro come in and just hit a ball into Triple Valley.
Yeah, that Red Sox team also had just the best prototypical pitcher in Bronson Arroyo on that team also, which was just not a guy that would ever blow it past people, but would just locate and bewhittle hitters. leave them bewildered all the time. So that definitely a youngster there, and Derek Lowe. That team, you're right, scrappy, or a team of almost a team of misfit, scrappy people would almost be what became that Red Sox team, and then it just formed into a perfect come together puzzle. So yeah, that was definitely a very good explanation.
Not to mention as well for the Giants having a Sergio Romo making Miguel Cabrera look at an 89-mile-per-hour pitch to end the World Series.
Right down the middle.
Right there.
I've got a random we haven't, obviously we're talking about teams we've seen, but just for the sheer fact of a team I would like to see, the 27 Yankees against the 20 Dodgers, arguably the best baseball team of all time, with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. I want to see it. Is it going to translate against Walker Buehler and Clayton Kershaw? Pure speculation and hypothetical wise, this is a conversation we could go on and on about. But I'd be interesting to see what the game looked like back then to now, and that would kind of give me an idea of the differences a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I remember last spring I spoke to Josh Lewin, who he is the former Mets radio commentator. He also did the Marlins and the Rangers, as well as some national broadcasts. I think he works for the Red Sox now as a sub guy. But he was running this thing last year called the Throwback League, where he'd put together historical matchups, and then the computer would tell him what happened. He would commentate over it, and that was a pretty interesting concept that maybe we could test out those matchups against each other. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap up the show here. Just want to thank Alex, Joe, and Cole for coming on. It was a pleasure having you guys. Yeah, that'll do it for Cheap Seats Chatter. I've been your host, Mathias Altman Kurosaki. Thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you all real soon.